and lost $3.5 billion deal on the spot. "Gentlemen," Braxton declared, swirling his burgundy wine, "tonight we don't just make history, we become it." His three vice presidents nodded in unison, their eyes gleaming with the promise of the biggest deal in corporate America. $3.5 billion. The number hung in the air like incense. The soft click of heels approached their table. Amara Williams, 24 years old with kind eyes that had seen too much hardship, balanced a silver tray with practiced grace. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from exhaustion. 2 jobs, night school, and a sick mother at home. This was her reality. "Sir, your wine," she began softly, reaching to replace his glass. The burgundy liquid caught the edge of his contract papers, leaving a dark stain across the white pages. Braxton's head snapped up, his face contorting with rage. "Don't talk to me, stupid girl. Just stand there and do your job." The words cut through the restaurant's ambient noise like a blade. Conversations stopped. Silverware paused mid-air. Even the piano player fell silent. Amara's breath caught in her throat, her grip tightening on the tray. The shame burned hotter than the restaurant's heated air, but she had learned long ago to swallow such moments. Bills didn't pay themselves. I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, dabbing at the spilled wine with a cloth napkin. Braxton leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "Sorry doesn't fix stupid, does it, boys?" His colleagues erupted in forced laughter, the sound echoing off the walls like breaking glass. One slapped the table so hard the remaining wine glasses trembled. But in the corner booth, partially hidden by shadows and potted palms, someone watched. Someone waited. Someone whose weathered hands gripped his water glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. What this arrogant CEO didn't know was that the waitress he just humiliated held the power to destroy his entire future. And tonight she would. This is the kind of everyday cruelty too many people face. If you believe dignity should never be for sale, hit that like button so more people hear stories like this. The restaurant's front doors opened with a whisper, revealing a figure that commanded attention without demanding it. Viktor Petrov moved like autumn wind, quiet, inevitable, and carrying the weight of seasons. His gray hair was perfectly groomed, his suit understated, but worth more than most people's cars. Behind him walked 2 assistants, their steps synchronized like a carefully orchestrated dance. Braxton's spine straightened. This was the moment. The billionaire Russian investor who could transform Apex Industries from a regional player into a global empire. "Mr. Petrov!" Braxton shot to his feet, extending his hand with the enthusiasm of a starving man reaching for bread. "Welcome to New York's finest establishment." Victor's handshake was firm but measured, his pale blue eyes scanning the room with the precision of a man who had built fortunes by reading between lines. "Mr. Callahan," Victor's voice carried the weight of Siberian winters. "My team has heard much about your leadership philosophy. Tonight, I want to see your values in action, not just your profit margins." Braxton's laugh boomed across the restaurant. "Values? Mr. Petrov, money speaks louder than any philosophy. Results are the only language that matters in business." As they settled into their seats, Amara approached again, her composure recovered, but her hands still bearing the slight tremor of earlier humiliation. She moved like a ghost, hoping to complete her service without another verbal assault. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said barely above a whisper. "Your appetizers are ready to be served." Braxton didn't even look up from his menu. "Then serve them and disappear. We have real business to discuss." Victor's eyes found Amara's for just a moment. A fleeting connection that spoke volumes in its silence. Something passed between them, quick as lightning but charged with recognition. Amara began placing plates with surgical precision, her movements fluid despite the tension. She served Victor first, then his assistants, then Braxton's colleagues. Braxton watched her pattern with growing irritation. "Did you forget who's paying your salary tonight?" Braxton snapped. "I should be served first, not last." The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Even the kitchen staff peered through the service window, sensing the electricity in the air. But what Braxton didn't realize was that his behavior was being catalogued, measured, and judged by someone who valued character over contracts. The main course arrived like pieces on a chessboard. Amara moved with renewed purpose, her earlier hesitation replaced by something deeper. A quiet dignity that spoke louder than any words. She had learned to find strength in silence, power in persistence. Victor observed everything. The way she served others before the loudest voice in the room. The gentle nod she gave to an elderly couple at a nearby table. The patient smile she offered a child who had dropped his crayon. "She's quite remarkable," Victor murmured to his assistant in Russian, the words floating like smoke over the table. Braxton, oblivious to the foreign conversation, continued his performance. "As I was saying, Mr. Petrov, leadership isn't about being liked. It's about being feared. Results through dominance. That's the apex way." "Interesting philosophy," Victor replied, cutting his steak with deliberate precision. "Tell me, how do you handle resistance?" "Crush it," Braxton declared, pounding his fist on the table for emphasis. "Weakness is a disease. You have to cut it out before it spreads." Amara returned to refill water glasses, moving gracefully through their conversation. As she reached for Braxton's glass, he grabbed her wrist. "You're doing it wrong," he hissed, his grip tight enough to leave marks. "When I'm talking business, you don't interrupt. You wait, like a good little servant." The words hung in the air like poison. Amara's eyes flashed, not with tears this time, but with something fiercer, something unbreakable. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady as stone. "I understand completely." But Victor saw what Braxton missed. In Amara's eyes burned the same fire he recognized in every successful person he'd ever met, the flame that refused to be extinguished. If you were in Amara's shoes, what would you have done? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters in conversations like this. "Mr. Callahan," Victor said quietly, "do you believe respect is earned or given?" Braxton released Amara's wrist with a dismissive wave. "Respect? From the help? Please, they earn paychecks. I earn empires." Little did Braxton know that his empire was about to crumble, and the person holding the demolition charges was standing right beside him. The dinner continued like a slowly tightening noose. With each course, Braxton grew more animated, more boastful, more cruel. The wine had loosened his tongue, but it had also sharpened his cruelty to a razor's edge. "You see, Mr. Petrov," Braxton gestured grandly with his fork, "the key to wealth is understanding hierarchies. Some people are born to lead. Others," he glanced at Amara as she cleared plates, "are born to serve." Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His assistant leaned closer, whispering urgently in Russian. Victor's response was a single word, sharp as breaking ice. "Da." Amara moved through her duties like water around rocks, present but untouchable. She had developed an armor over the years, forged in the fires of necessity and hardened by countless small cruelties. But tonight felt different. Tonight the air itself seemed to pulse with possibility. "Tell me about your family, Mr. Callahan," Victor said, his voice carrying new weight. "Do you have children?" Braxton beamed with pride. 2 sons, both at Harvard. Legacy admits, of course. Money opens doors that merit never could. "And you're teaching them your business philosophy?" "Absolutely. Never show weakness. Never give an inch. And never, ever let the hired help think they're your equal." As if summoned by his words, Amara appeared with dessert menus. Her movements were different now, more purposeful, like a chess player who had finally seen the endgame. "Your dessert selection, gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and strong. Braxton barely glanced up. "Just bring us your most expensive bottle of champagne. We're celebrating the death of another American company and the birth of a Russian acquisition." The words hit Victor like a physical blow. His face remained stone, but his eyes became arctic. Amara set down the menus with hands that no longer trembled. "Will there be anything else, sir?" "Yeah," Braxton sneered. "Learn some respect for your betters." But respect, as Braxton was about to discover, was a currency he could never afford to pay. The champagne arrived in a bucket of ice that seemed to echo the chill now permeating Table 7. Amara presented the bottle with professional grace, but there was something new in her bearing, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. "Dom Perignon 2012, she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the hushed restaurant. "Shall I pour for everyone?" "Just pour and get lost." Braxton waved dismissively, then turned back to Victor with renewed enthusiasm. "Now, about the merger terms." "Mr. Callahan," Victor interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of avalanches. "I have a question about your company culture." Braxton leaned forward eagerly. "Fire away. Apex Industries is built on excellence." "How do you treat those beneath you?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Braxton's colleagues shifted uncomfortably, suddenly finding their champagne glasses fascinating. "Beneath me?" Braxton laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Mr. Petrov, in business there's no beneath or above. There's only profitable and unprofitable, useful and—" He glanced at Amara. Useless. Victor's fingers drummed silently on the table, a rhythm only those who knew him well would recognize as dangerous. "I see," Victor said quietly. "And this philosophy has served you well?" "Look around." Braxton spread his arms wide, champagne sloshing in his glass. "This restaurant, this deal, this moment, all proof that my methods work. The weak serve the strong. That's the natural order." As he spoke, Amara moved between tables with liquid grace, her presence somehow more noticeable despite Braxton's attempts to render her invisible. Other diners watched her with growing respect, sensing the dignity she carried like a crown. Victor's assistant whispered something urgent in his ear. The billionaire's face remained impassive, but his jaw tightened like a spring under pressure. "Mr. Callahan," Victor said slowly, "before we finalize anything, I'd like you to meet someone very important to me." The bomb was about to drop, and Braxton Callahan was standing directly at ground zero. The restaurant's atmosphere crackled with electricity as Victor raised his hand. Amara, who had been refilling water glasses at a distant table, looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded restaurant, and something passed between them, a communication deeper than words. She began walking toward Table 7, her steps measured and purposeful. Braxton, deep in his champagne-fueled monologue about market dominance, didn't notice the approaching storm. "Which is why weak people need strong leaders," Braxton was saying, his voice rising with alcohol and arrogance. "Take that waitress, for example. Without people like us giving her purpose, what would she be? Nothing, a complete waste of—" "Excuse me, sir." Amara's voice cut through his speech like a blade through silk. Braxton spun around, his face flushed with wine and rage. "What did I tell you about interrupting? Are you deaf and stupid?" The silence that followed was deafening. It was the kind of quiet that precedes earthquakes. Victor stood slowly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of glaciers and the finality of falling snow. "Mr. Callahan," he said, each word precise as surgery, I'd like you to properly meet someone very dear to me." Braxton looked between Victor and Amara, confusion clouding his features. "I don't understand," Braxton stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating. Victor placed a protective hand on Amara's shoulder, and the gesture spoke volumes that contracts never could. "This is stupid Waitress, as you so eloquently put it." Victor's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire restaurant. "Is my daughter. I adopted Amara when she was 7. She chose to keep her mother's name, but she is every bit my daughter." His voice hardened again as he turned back to Braxton. "And I am every bit her father." The words hit Braxton like a freight train carrying his worst nightmares, and the sound of $3.5 billion crashing to the floor was deafening. Braxton's champagne glass slipped from his nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The golden liquid spread across the white stone like spilled blood, each drop reflecting the chandelier light. Your daughter?" Braxton's voice cracked like ice under pressure. His face had gone the color of old parchment, sweat beading on his forehead despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. Amara straightened, and suddenly she wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was Viktor Petrov's heir, a princess who had chosen to walk among commoners to understand the kingdom she would one day inherit. "Yes, Papa," she said, her voice now carrying the same steel that ran through Victor's veins. "This is the American businessman you wanted me to observe, the one seeking your partnership." Victor's smile was colder than Siberian winter. "Amara has been working here for 3 months, learning about American business culture from the ground up. She insisted on earning her own way, refusing my offer of a comfortable position. She wanted to understand how Americans really treat their people." The revelation hit Braxton's colleagues like shrapnel. They pushed back from the table as if proximity to their boss might be contagious, their faces pale with the realization of what they had witnessed. "Mr. Petrov, please." Braxton's voice rose to a desperate pitch. "This is all a misunderstanding. I didn't know—" "Didn't know what?" Victor's voice could have frozen fire. "That you should treat every human being with basic dignity? That respect isn't determined by bank accounts? That character matters more than credit scores?" The other diners had stopped even pretending to eat. Phones emerged from purses and pockets, cameras capturing the public execution of a tyrant's reputation. "Don't touch me," Victor said quietly as Braxton reached desperately for his arm, but the words carried the force of avalanches. Victor stood like a monument to justice, his presence filling the restaurant with the weight of inevitability. Amara moved to stand beside him, no longer the invisible servant, but revealed as the hidden queen she had always been. "Mr. Callahan," Victor's voice carried the finality of closing tomb doors. "In Russia, we have a saying. The measure of a man is how he treats those who can do nothing for him. Tonight, you have shown me exactly what kind of man you are." Braxton stumbled to his feet, his chair clattering backward. "Please, Mr. Petrov, $3.5 billion. You can't throw away that kind of money." "Throw away?" Amara's voice cut through his desperation like truth through lies. "You called me stupid. Twice. You grabbed my wrist. You treated me like I was less than human. Which part was misunderstood?" Victor reached into his jacket and withdrew the preliminary contract, 50 pages of legal language that had taken months to negotiate. With deliberate slowness, he began tearing it into strips, each rip echoing through the silent restaurant like thunder. "No!" Braxton lunged forward, trying to catch the falling pieces of paper. "You can't do this! My company, my investors, my shareholders—" "We'll learn that character matters more than capital," Victor finished, letting the final pieces fall like snow. "My daughter works here because she believes every job has dignity, every person has worth. You have proven unworthy of both her time and my trust." In less than 5 minutes, Braxton Callahan had transformed from a billionaire CEO into a cautionary tale, and his fall was being broadcast to the world in real time. The aftermath moved with the speed of digital age reckoning. Phones continued recording as Victor gathered his coat, his movements unhurried but final. The contract pieces lay scattered across the floor like the remnants of Braxton's reputation. "The deal died the moment you called my daughter stupid," Victor said without turning around. "In my world, respect is not negotiable." Amara removed her apron with quiet dignity, folding it carefully before placing it on the table. "I quit," she told the restaurant manager, who had appeared to witness the spectacular downfall. "Effective immediately." Braxton's phone erupted with notifications, texts, calls, news alerts. The story was already spreading across social media like wildfire. Billionaire Waitress began trending before dessert was served at other tables. "My board is calling," one of Braxton's VPs whispered urgently. "Stock price is dropping. The Petrov deal was supposed to be announced tomorrow. What do I tell them?" Braxton stared at the screen, watching his company's valuation hemorrhage millions by the minute. Comments flooded in from around the world, each one a dagger to his digital reputation. "Tell them," Braxton said hollowly, "that we learned respect can't be bought." Victor paused at the door, turning back one final time. "Mr. Callahan, wealth without wisdom is just expensive stupidity. Tonight you've proven that truth spectacularly." The billionaire investor and his daughter walked out into the New York night, leaving behind a restaurant full of whispers and a CEO whose empire was crumbling in real time. Braxton sank into his chair, surrounded by the detritus of his hubris, torn contracts, spilled wine, and the crushing weight of consequence. The most expensive lesson in business history had just been taught, and the tuition was $3.5 billion plus one man's entire legacy. 3 hours later, the restaurant had emptied except for cleaning staff and the ghosts of shattered dreams. Braxton sat alone at table 7, his empire collapsing in real time on his phone screen. The news had exploded across every major platform. Billionaire CEO loses $3.5 billion deal after calling investor's daughter stupid. His phone buzzed with a call from his company's crisis management team. "Sir, we need a statement. The board is calling an emergency meeting. Shareholders are demanding answers." Braxton looked up to find the restaurant manager approaching with a somber expression. "Mr. Callahan, I need to inform you that your corporate account has been suspended. Mr. Petrov owns a significant stake in our parent company. He's requested that you be permanently banned from all our establishments worldwide." The irony cut deeper than any blade. Braxton had treated the restaurant like his personal kingdom, never knowing he was actually dining in his judge's courtroom. Outside, in a black Mercedes, Victor and Amara sat in comfortable silence as the city lights blurred past their windows. "You knew, didn't you?" Amara asked quietly. "You knew he would reveal his true character if I worked there long enough." Victor nodded, his weathered hand covering hers. "Power doesn't corrupt, my dear daughter. It reveals. I needed to see who Braxton Callahan really was before trusting him with billions of my investors' money. And now? Now the world knows that character is the only currency that truly matters. Your 3 months of observation just saved hundreds of people from working under a tyrant." Back in the restaurant, Braxton finally stood on unsteady legs, leaving behind not just a table but an entire world view that had crumbled in a single evening. The waitress he had dismissed as stupid had just taught him the most expensive lesson of his life. Never underestimate the power of human dignity. 6 months later. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Petrov Enterprises' New York headquarters, illuminating Amara as she reviewed quarterly reports in her corner office. The nameplate on her door read, "Amara Petrov Williams, Director of Corporate Ethics." Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Apex Industries files for bankruptcy following investor exodus. The article detailed how Braxton Callahan's behavior that night had triggered a domino effect. Investors withdrew, partners severed ties, and employees resigned en masse. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Her assistant entered with a familiar face. James, one of Braxton's former vice presidents. "Ms. Petrov Williams," James said nervously. "I know this is unusual, but I wanted to personally apologize for that night. And I was hoping to discuss employment opportunities. Your father's reputation for treating employees fairly is legendary." Amara smiled, remembering the scared young executive who had laughed at his boss's cruelty. "Mr. Henderson, everyone deserves a second chance. Tell me, what did you learn from that evening?" James met her eyes directly. That respect isn't a luxury, it's a requirement, and that the person serving your coffee might just be the person deciding your future. Outside her window, New York bustled with millions of dreams and ambitions. Somewhere in the city, Braxton Callahan was learning that rebuilding a reputation was infinitely harder than destroying one. His new reality included therapy sessions, community service, and a long journey toward understanding the human cost of his former arrogance. But in this gleaming office, justice had found its balance. The waitress who had been called stupid was now teaching the world that wisdom comes not from bank statements, but from how we treat each other when we think no one important is watching. Because sometimes, the most important person is the one you least expect. And respect can't be bought. It has to be shown.